My name is Ryan, and this happened in October 2024. My friend Ethan and I ran a small YouTube channel where we investigated American horror stories and urban legends. One night, we received dozens of emails about a stretch of road known as Route 6. Every email told the same story. After midnight, a woman dressed in white would appear on the side of the road. At first, we assumed it was just another local legend. But then one email caught our attention. The sender claimed that he had actually picked the woman up and let her into his car. The final line of the email sent a chill down my spine. If she asks you for help, never stop. That warning only made us more curious. So later that same night, Ethan and I made a decision. We were going to drive down Route 6 and find out the truth for ourselves.
The next night, we packed our cameras, flashlights, and recording gear and headed out to Route 6. The road was far more deserted than we had expected. Dense trees stretched along both sides of the highway, and there wasn't a single house in sight for miles. It was around 11:45 p.m. Ethan was talking to the camera while I focused on driving. Everything seemed normal at first, but the atmosphere felt strangely heavy, like something wasn't right. Then, suddenly, our car radio burst into loud static. I tried switching stations, but every channel was the same, nothing but crackling noise. Then, from within the static, a faint female voice emerged. Soft, slow, almost like a whisper. "Will you take me home?" My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Ethan stopped talking and looked at me. For a few seconds, neither of us said a word. Then, we looked at each other. The moment we heard the woman's voice, the inside of the car fell silent. I immediately turned off the radio. But the strange thing was, the voice was still there. "Will you take me home?" This time, it sounded much clearer. Ethan quickly turned around and looked into the back seat, but it was empty. No one was there. He grabbed the camera and started recording. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. Then, in the glow of our headlights, we saw someone standing on the side of the road. A woman. She was wearing an old white dress. Her head was lowered. And she stood completely still. The cold night wind caused her dress to sway gently, yet she herself didn't move an inch. Not a step. Not a twitch. Nothing. As our car got closer, a strange feeling of dread began growing in my chest. And for reasons I couldn't explain, I suddenly didn't want to stop. I slowly eased my foot off the gas. The headlights were now shining directly on the woman. Her face was hidden behind long strands of black hair, making it impossible to see her features clearly. "Ryan, don't stop," Ethan said nervously. "Something doesn't feel right." But the road was completely deserted, and the woman looked like she needed help. So I pulled the car over. For several seconds, she just stood there, motionless, watching. Then, she slowly began walking toward the passenger side window. What struck me immediately was that her footsteps made no sound at all. Not on the pavement, not in the gravel, nothing. When she finally reached the car, she slowly lifted her head. My stomach tightened. Her eyes looked strangely empty. Not angry, not sad, just empty. Then, in a soft voice, she asked, "Will you take me home?" And at that exact moment, the radio turned on by The radio switched on by itself, instantly filling the car with harsh white noise. And through that static, her voice came again, clearer than before. "Will you take me home?" I quickly shut the radio off. But the voice didn't stop. It was still there. Outside. In the air. Like the entire road itself was speaking. Ethan turned around in panic. "Ryan, don't look back." But it was too late. I glanced into the rearview mirror. My breath caught in my throat. The back seat wasn't empty anymore. A shadowy figure was sitting there. Its head was lowered as if it had been waiting for us all along. I tried to start the car. Nothing. The key wouldn't turn. Then the woman leaned closer to my window and whispered, "Now you can't leave me." Click! All the car doors locked themselves at once. The moment the locks clicked shut, the atmosphere inside the car grew heavier. The shadow of the woman outside pressed closer against the window, as if it was trying to merge with the glass itself. I turned the key again and again, but the engine refused to start. "Ryan, she's inside," Ethan said, his voice shaking. I slowly looked into the rearview mirror. The shadow in the back seat was clearer now. Its head began to lift. And then all the lights inside the car shut off on their own. We were completely swallowed by darkness. Only the faint spill of the headlights reached the empty road ahead. That's when I felt it. A cold breath right beside my ear. And a voice whispered, "You left me in the middle of the road." I snapped around instantly. But there was no one. The moment I turned around, the back seat was completely empty. But that emptiness only made things worse, because just seconds ago, someone had been sitting there. Ethan's breathing grew faster. "Ryan, she didn't disappear. She's changing." Suddenly, the camera sitting on the dashboard turned on by itself. It started recording. No one touched it. On the screen, Ethan and I were visible, along with the back seat behind us. But in the video feed, the woman was still there, sitting exactly where she had been. And this time, she was staring directly into the camera. Her eyes slowly began to turn completely white. Then, without warning, the car started on its own. Neither of us had turned the key. And outside, along the road, a sound erupted. Footsteps. Many of them. Running alongside our car. The car suddenly accelerated on its own, and Route 6 began to feel like a dark tunnel swallowing everything around us. The trees on both sides bent unnaturally toward the road, as if they were leaning in to watch us pass. Ethan kept staring at the camera screen. Why won't this recording stop? Then, a new frame appeared on the screen. Something was walking on top of our car, on the roof. Slow, deliberate footsteps began to echo inside the vehicle, too. Thud, thud, thud. I looked up instinctively, but the roof looked completely normal. Then, suddenly, the steering wheel jerked violently on its own. The car turned toward a road that wasn't on the GPS at all. An old, hidden bend in Route 6 we had never seen before. Ethan shouted, "We're not controlling this anymore!" And then, from the back seat, a whisper came. Soft, close, final. "You're on my road now." After that whisper, a heavy silence filled the car. Only the engine and our frantic breathing remained. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel, but it felt like something else had taken control. The road no longer stayed straight. It was pulling us toward an old, broken path that wasn't part of Route 6 anymore. Then, Ethan turned the camera screen toward me. "Ryan, look at this." On the live feed, the two of us were clearly visible in the front seats. But the back seat had changed. The woman was still there, But now, she wasn't alone. Dozens of shadowy figures filled the space behind us, as if something from another world had crowded into the car. Then suddenly, one of the shadows slowly reached forward and touched the camera. The screen went completely black. At the exact same moment, a voice came from behind us. "Now you can't leave us." The moment the camera screen went black, the darkness inside the car felt heavier. Outside, the road no longer looked familiar. It was as if we were being pulled into a completely different place. Ethan nervously grabbed the camera and tried to pull it off the dashboard. But before he could, it turned itself back on. This time, something different appeared on the screen. Not our car. A bus. An old bus. One we had never seen before. Yet somehow it felt strangely familiar. Like a memory we had forgotten. Standing inside the bus was the same woman in white. Behind her sat dozens of children. Their faces were blurred beyond recognition. "Ryan, this isn't just a road," Ethan said, his voice trembling. "It's some kind of loop." Then, without warning, the car came to a complete stop. Directly in front of us was the same broken turn in the road. Again, the exact same one. And this time, there were footprints on the pavement. Small footprints, like those of a child. They stretched across the road, leading straight toward our car. After the voice echoed from the back seat, my hands froze on the steering wheel. "Now you can't leave us." The temperature inside the car dropped so fast that our breath became visible in the air. Then the radio suddenly exploded with static. A moment later, a voice emerged from the crackling noise. It sounded like an old news broadcast. October 17th, 1954. A school bus crashed near Route 6. Several children remain missing. The transmission abruptly cut out. Ethan stared at the radio. "Do you think this is connected to that woman?" Before I could answer, something appeared on the windows. Small ones. At first, there were only a few. Then more and more, until dozens of tiny handprints covered the glass. It looked as if children were standing outside the car, pressing their palms against the windows and staring in at us. Then we saw him. A small boy standing in the middle of the road. The same boy, motionless, watching us. Slowly, he raised one arm and pointed toward the forest. "Go there," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. Then, without warning, he vanished. The moment the boy vanished, the road was empty again. Ethan and I sat in silence for several seconds. The forest ahead was swallowed by darkness, but for some reason, it felt as if something was calling us deeper into it. "We need to leave," I finally said. But before either of us could move, the GPS screen suddenly turned on by itself. There was no map, no route, only an old black and white photograph. It showed a school bus lying overturned in a deep ravine near Route 6. At the bottom of the image was a date, October 17, 1954. Then the photograph changed. Now the woman in white was standing there, and in her arms was a small boy. Neither of them moved. They simply stared out from the screen. A few seconds later,
Red letters slowly appeared across the display. Find what was left behind. A chill ran through my body. Then, from deep within the forest, we heard the sound of a child crying. Faint, distant, but unmistakable. Ethan looked at me. I think
She wants us to find something. Before I could answer, a small yellow light appeared between the trees. It hovered there for a moment. Then it slowly drifted deeper into the woods, as if it wanted us to follow. We looked at each other for a moment. Then we grabbed our flashlights and followed the yellow light into the forest. The deeper we went, the thicker the trees became. The air was completely still. No insects, no birds, nothing. The light eventually led us to an old, rusted iron gate. Beyond it, hidden among overgrown bushes, stood a school bus, half buried in the earth. Its frame was covered in rust, as if it had been sitting there for decades. This is the bus," Ethan whispered. The moment we stepped inside, a feeling of unease washed over me. Dust covered every seat. Every seat except one. A single seat near the middle of the bus was perfectly clean. Resting on it was an old teddy bear. Beneath the bear lay a folded piece of paper. I picked it up and carefully unfolded it. Written in childish handwriting was a single sentence. "She couldn't take us home." A chill ran down my spine. Then, from the back of the bus, we heard it. A child's laughter. Soft, quiet, and far too close. The moment we heard the child's laughter from the back of the bus, the paper nearly slipped from my hands. I swung my flashlight toward the sound. At first, there was nothing there. Then, slowly, a small figure began to emerge from the darkness. It was the same boy we had seen standing on Route 6. But this time, he wasn't smiling. There was fear in his eyes. With a trembling hand, he pointed toward the very back of the bus. Ethan and I carefully made our way down the aisle. When we reached the last row, we noticed something strange. Part of the floor was broken away. Beneath it, buried in the dirt, was a small metal locket. As soon as I picked it up, the entire bus shook violently. The air filled with the sound of children screaming. Voices echoed from every direction. Desperate, terrified. Then, suddenly, the woman in white appeared right in front of us. But she didn't look frightening anymore. Tears filled her eyes. She stared at the locket in my hand, and in a soft, trembling voice, she said, The moment the woman spoke, the screams echoing through the bus began to fade. She slowly raised a trembling hand and pointed toward the locket. "It belonged to my son," she said. Suddenly, a thick fog surrounded us. Then, like scenes from an old movie, images began to appear all around us. We saw what had happened on that night in 1954. A violent storm had swept across Route 6. The school bus lost control and crashed. Many of the children became trapped inside. Before help could arrive, it was already too late. The woman was their caretaker. She had died trying to save her son, but her son's locket was never found. And perhaps that was why her spirit had remained trapped on Route 6 all these years. As I held the locket out toward her, tears streamed down her face. Behind her, the children slowly began to appear.
one by one. This time, there was no fear in their eyes.
Fear in their eyes.
They were smiling. Then, suddenly, a brilliant white light flooded the entire forest. It was so bright that Ethan and I had to shield our eyes. And when the light finally faded, everything was gone. The bus was gone. The children were gone. And the woman was gone too. Only the two of us remained, standing alone in the silent woods. The next morning, police searched the area. They managed to find records of an old accident that had occurred nearby decades earlier. But there was no trace of the bus. No wreckage. No evidence. Nothing. Even now, when I watch the footage from that night, there's one detail that still gives me chills. In the very last frame before she disappears into the light, the woman turns toward the camera and smiles. Then her lips move softly, and she says, "Thank you." But the story doesn't end there, because in the final second of the recording, another figure appears between the trees. Someone we never saw that night. Someone who wasn't on the bus. And to this day, that figure is still standing on Route 6. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because the next story I tell might be even more terrifying than Route 6. Belle Reed Ghost. If you enjoyed this terrifying journey, subscribe to Mr. Nightmare 2.0 and become part of our growing horror community. Sweet dreams, if you can sleep.